Hi, Melina from Yo Geek here. So we're going to continue on with our low back and hip discussion. So this is part 2 of that. I'm not sure how many parts there will be, probably a few. But in regards to low back discomfort when working out or just doing daily activities, obviously if you have a chronic issue, you need to get it checked out by a doc, make sure nothing's going on. But a lot of times when I'm working with clients, I notice it's either there's not proper core engagement, or when they're doing exercises, they're not activating the glutes, hamstrings, or basically the posterior chain properly. So we're going to go over a couple stretches that kind of tried and true feel good. You'll see it a lot, like if you've gone to physical therapy, a lot of physical therapists will throw this in, and it's also in yoga. So there's that. We'll do a couple glute activation and hamstring awareness activation exercises related to stuff I see in workout videos all the time. And clients tell me that when they do these exercises, they feel discomfort. So we're going to hit those, and then next week we'll talk a little bit about strength. So like when you're doing a deadlift, things like that, what's happening to help kind of stop jumping into our low back. So the first yummy exercise is a stretch, which is going to be child's pose. So I have sneakers on, so this makes it a little bit weird, but it's still manageable. 2 ways of doing child's pose. You can either have the knees wide on the mat or narrow and close together. So when you have your knees wide and you start gliding back into this, big toe mounds are together. You may want a pillow, blanket, or something, especially if you're really tight in the hips. And you can even stay up like this and kind of start to work your way back. You can place a towel, blanket, or something underneath the ankles to give them a little support. There's a bazillion ways to modify this and make it feel yummy. So with knees wide, you're going to get into the hips a little bit more. And you're just going to relax your head down either on the back of your hands or on a block, or on a blanket, or whatever. So you're going to hang out here. The important thing is to take several long, deep breaths. So as you're breathing in, I want you to really pay attention to how the rib cage expands, how it moves. So you should feel it moving like left to right, front and back. How the belly softens. And as you exhale, you're not forcing the exhale out. We're starting from kind of low in the belly and letting the breath work its way out. It's nice and easy. And then on that exhale is when you want to think of giving yourself permission to kind of relax into this. So when your knees are wide on the mat, big toe mounds together. Again, it can feel more opening in the hips. If you draw your knees in closer together and sit back, you just kind of round over your legs. And again, just letting the head go, or you can place your hands along the side and just really curl over. And that's going to get more into the back. And you would do the same thing, really deep breathing on those. This is great, like when you first get up or kind of throughout the day or before you go to bed. So that's going to put your spine in more flexion. And for most people, it's safe because you can bring the floor closer to you. So like I said, if you're really stiff or just things aren't, you may even be up here and just gliding yourself back in order to work your way back and loosen up those hips. So there's a ton of options there. The other one, so going back to your child's pose, if you can, the knees wide, big toe mounds together, you're going to extend your arms, and I want you to think that you're really reaching away from you, coming up onto fingertips, and imagine that you have a cupcake underneath your hand, and you don't want to squish it. So you want to think of trying to pull yourself away so you feel lengthening down the sides. You're not feeling this in your neck, and you're still going back to that long, deep breathing. Then you can let the hands relax, walk over to one side. So you're moving the hands over to one side so you feel a side body stretch. And walk over to the other. Same thing, few rounds of breath here and letting it relax out. Then I'm going to have you come to your belly. So this is when we're going to start looking into that glute activation. So I see in a ton of videos alternating arm and leg lifts where you're kind of doing the Supermans, and I have time and time again clients telling me that doesn't feel great on their back. So what I notice happening here is that when you're in this position and you start to lift your leg, people are either letting the quads take over, or they're like lifting too high and without control, and so they're kind of compressing that low back. So as you're chilling out here on the floor, it's always good to get a couple wiggles. Check in with your pelvis, and you want to make sure that your pubis is actually moving towards the mat. So it's taking that kind of arch, and you might find you want to make sure you're not driving a truck under this hip flexor area, FYI. So you're moving the pubis towards the mat, and then you're just going to hang out, and I want you to think of unweighting the leg. So instead of just yoinking it up, I want you to really focus on the hamstrings helping to lift the leg. So think slow, feel them engage, and then you'll feel the glutes turn on. So toes are pointed, and you're just going to let that leg come up a little bit with control, and you should not feel this in your low back. So you're not yoinking it up. So this is a little bit different. It's more controlled, but then you can really feel the hamstrings working and the glutes working. So from here, you would just alternate. Still engaging the core, so activating, so you're making that connection by creating a little tone in the pelvis, I'm singing to you. Pelvic floor. Everybody has pelvic floor muscles. Drawing up and in with those, feeling the lower transverse abs turn on. And you're just going to alternate. And then if you want to add on to this, you can start to add the arms where you alternate. So if you're lifting your left leg, you would lift your right arm. Head can be looking down at the mat. You can even rest it on a blanket if you got some neck stuff going on. But you're just going to alternate, again, really mindful of how you're lifting up that leg, that you're not popping into that overextension in the back. So pubis is still moving towards the mat. And then you would just alternate. Now, if it kind of bugs your neck or something, you can, when you're lifting the arms, either do a little internal rotation and think that you're reaching away, so you're nice and long down the body, or you can even bring your arms down to like cactus arms and alternate that way. Nice and slow. Then after you've done a few rounds of these, I usually set a timer. Then you would, as a counter, go back to your child's pose. Maybe the knees close together, let the arms reach out and release that low back. A little pointer, if when you're doing those leg lifts, if you're just like, okay, I'm just feeling it, like it's really uncomfortable in my low back, because maybe hip flexors are too tight, grab a blanket and put it under your hips to kind of, again, bring that floor closer to you and take a little bit of that arch out. So, good thing to practice child's pose, sneak 'em in. I'll have a different sneak 'em in video, but those are really nice. And then also when you're using that breath work and taking those long deep breaths, it helps chill us out. So the next exercise section that we're going to do today is tried and true. It's going to seem basic, but I see these in a lot of videos too, and I see people just flying through them. So this is your tried and true kind of Jane Fonda workouts, the different variations of leg lifts, clamshells, things of that nature. So you're going to come onto your side, and you just want to be mindful that you're not rolling too far back. Ooh, my mic is getting sassy with me. So you're up on your hip to where it's comfortable. Obviously, everybody's put together a little different. So you just want to make sure it's not uncomfortable, but you're not rolling all the way back. You can either have your head resting on a pillow, or for me, because it doesn't bother my neck, I'm propping it up with my hand. So feet are flexed, both of them, so you're active in both legs. Top leg is going to lift up so that you are about hip point distance apart. So you got to find that core engagement again so that you're not dumping in through the spine. So rib cages are Coming out of that arch, everything's nice and lined up, feels wonderful. This might be enough if you're working on some of this min glute med strength. Again, these are the stabilizers that when we activate them and strengthen them properly, help with form and help our low back feel better. So you can do leg lifts. Again, I just set a timer because I'd rather focus on form and breathing. And you're not doing crazy flying through them, really controlled, flex through the foot, really reaching away and lifting, still engaging the core. The next one is still having this engagement, is also check in and make sure that this TFL isn't taking over. So when you're doing these lifts, sometimes it helps to rotate the femur a little bit, toe pointed down, to really accentuate the tush. The other one is you're gonna bring the leg forward, not swing, but bring it forward, keeping control of that belly and then moving it back. And when you move the leg back, again, you're not going so far back that you're kind of arching that back or going in extension. So you would go through this a few times. I set a timer for maybe a minute, 30 seconds to a minute. Ideally, you would do these back to back to back without a break. But if you're kind of building the strength and building the stability, take a break in between. You can bring your leg up if this feels good, or a figure 4 stretch, which I've shown in other videos. So the other one then are our lovely circles. So you can place a hand on the hip, again, making sure you're not overly rotating, maybe a little internal rotation with that leg, and you would go one direction and then the other. So that's really going to target these glutes. And then also, because you're slowing it down, you're kind of noticing how things are working, what's happening back there. So you would do that, and then flip to the other side, do the other side. You can either count, 15 or 20, but I'd say try it with time. Then the other one, nice little stretch after you do something like that. You want to release that hip. So you could do a figure 4 stretch, which I think we've talked about, but really flexing through that foot, using your glute muscles to open up the hip, and you'll just hang out here. Maybe even drawing the bent leg away from you, getting an upper body stretch. You can place this foot down, come over to the side like this, hang out here, really feeling that hip open up. Hold that for a bit, and then the tried and true, apparently that's my phrase of the day, pigeon. So bring a foot under, and you want your heel closer to your hip, nice and long through that back leg. We went over this last week, I think. And ease yourself down to whatever's appropriate. Again, releasing that hip. Okay, so that little bit of posterior chain work, just so that when you're doing those alternating Supermans, you know how to engage that hamstring and those glutes, and how to activate those. So think of that you're unweighting the leg versus really crunching through those quads and things going a little willy-nilly. So those are a couple things to try. Those stretches, the stretches I showed you last week. Like I said, next week we're going to move a little bit more into strength training sort of stuff. And then, like, after you would do a strength training workout, do figure 4 stretches, pigeons, all sorts of yummy stuff, foam roll, all of the bits. For tight hip flexors, really need to get in there and working those lunges like we did last week to help open up that hip flexor and relax them. And again, foam rolling and all that stuff is great too. All right, without further ado, I am off. I hope you have a wonderful week. I will be posting this and a sneak 'em in video. All right, thanks, much love.